Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practice of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Relly Nadler. Dr. Cathy Greenberg and I have been doing this now for 20 years. And so we're coming up on that in the beginning of the year. And we're going to have a special segment today and one or two others where we're going to do a little deeper dive. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about my background. Then we're going to have a special show. We're going to talk about Cathy's background. We've always been focusing on others and what do they do. So, given our 20-year celebration, we'd like to have an opportunity to just go a little deeper in some of the work that each of us are doing. So, Kat, welcome.
Hey, Relly, I am so psyched. Can we still use that word psyched? So
Yes,
psyched.
psych for a psych. Right.
Well, I think it's exciting that we have been doing this for 20 years, and I am even more excited about interviewing you. We haven't done this in a very long time, and you've been up to some amazing things, and I'm very happy we're going to get the chance today to do a deeper dive into some of your tools, some of the things that you're up to, and frankly, how you have been helping people around the world for the last 20 years and what's on the horizon. So without
Oh,
further
good.
ado, yeah, let me introduce to you someone who is near and dear to me and who I am celebrating a 20th anniversary with, which is extraordinarily rare for me. So I'm
That's right.
very, very happy today to introduce all of you to somebody I really believe is a trailblazer in the field of leadership development, leveraging the power of emotional intelligence. And Relly has transformed executives and organizations in over 225 companies. He is an inspiring and thought-provoking keynote speaker, psychologist, and author of 8 best-selling books. He is also a master level executive coach. And in the ICF world, they call that an MCC, a master certified coach. He's above that. I don't know how many other ranks we have, but really, you are so far above an MCC. There's no roof on that one. So,
That's
um, yeah, no, Relly is really a dedicated uh, expert in his career, and he has been helping leaders break free from the shackles of autopilot to reach their full potential. He loves to say, if you stay on autopilot, you stay average. And I cannot tell you how many times that has been true. And I have said that to so many thousands of people. But unfortunately, we are on autopilot, what, really over 95% of the time,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So we got to kick that habit, and that's a big one. Relly believes that you can all be more emotionally intelligent in moments with the right strategies, utilizing his suite of proprietary tools, which we'll focus on in today's show exclusively. So grab a seat, get your earbuds in, and we're going to talk about some of his leading tools like turbulence tools to master the moment, emotional audit, name, and so much more. Today, we're going to explore his mission, the leadership challenges, and some of the best tools Relly uses to help others be their best. Relly, welcome to the show.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kat. I'm glad we can take a deep dive, and I'm also excited to do the same thing with you. I know you recently won a couple awards. I want to make sure we kind of spend the whole show. We can kind of talk about that. So yes, so today is a little bit of my focus. We'll go a little deeper. You hear my voice, you hear Kathy's voice. Now we're on YouTube. You could see us, but it's nice to be able to share some of these tools with our audience.
No, absolutely. And, we always start off, no surprise to you, a little bit about our guest. And as my special guest today on Leadership Development News, we would love to hear who have been some of the major influencers in your thinking, in your strategic approach to leadership development using emotional intelligence, some of the things that have really made you who you are so that you can support all of us,
Right.
Relly.
Well, thanks, Kat. And so we always start with that with our guests, but these are kind of defining moments. And, I think for our audience to think back. So, one obviously is my parents. My dad was very smart, did a year of law school, was an entrepreneur, had his own company, about 200 employees as a shoe manufacturer, and very, very kind of bright. And then my mom was all heart. So I really had kind of the both piece of that. My mom, we would have people over our house all the time. She was the incredible host. And so I had a good blend uh, of both the head and the heart. And then as I came out to Santa Barbara, where if you see me, that's where I'm at now. I had a professor, George Brown. I was the youngest one in this program it's called Confluent Education. So it really was emotional intelligence. Confluence, where two things come together. The whole education was bringing together the thinking domain and the affective domain. So the whole program was around affective domain, which is really emotional intelligence. And given I was the youngest one in the program, he was very inspirational for me and basically said, I think you're kind of this diamond in the rough. And he was trying to smooth me out a little bit. And so that was really good. And that was very affirming. And then I think some other things I've talked about on the show was being involved in Outward Bound, in all my 20s, got a chance to lead people. And it was 23 days on day one, strangers, day 23, high performing team. And having this that we now call the coach approach, that you would teach some stuff, but then you would just step back and watch them develop and see the group come together. And so I had series of those, and the medium was outdoor adventure. So it stressed people and who showed up in the stress. And so that was very significant. And then in the professional world were some of the early things with Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, Peter Senge, The Fifth Discipline. And then when Dan Goleman's book came out in 1995, I said, whoa, that's just like my master's program. And, at that point, I had already had my doctorate in psychology. And so that has become my focus. But then, who else has been an important influence on me?
No idea whatsoever.
Dr. Cathy Greenberg. I
Oh,
mean,
no.
so for our 20 years, and you have been great. And so my uh professional wife, and so we've just gone through a lot in the 20 years, and just seeing how you manage stress and your sense of adversity, dealing with adversity and adaptability, and your generosity. So those are the ones I would have put my finger on.
You are more than generous with that. And let me just give the audience a little bit of context, before we jump into how you got interested in emotional intelligence. And for those of you who may have been listening to Relly prior to my joining his show, 20 years ago, Relly got this crazy idea that he wanted to bring everything that he had created in the leadership playbook, which thank
Hmm.
God he did, to the world. And you were really still building, and you were growing, and you were trying to figure out, how can I get all of this information that I have to the public in the easiest way possible? And we called those shows radio. But what we found, over time is, now we're into podcasts. And really, I have to thank you for bringing me along with you. I was one of your guests on the show way back
Right.
then. And following the show, we had this harebrained idea that we would be a great duo, the dynamic duo, and we would each bring our strengths to bear. And so you brought all of the emotional intelligence as your gifts, and I was bringing together all of the social and emotional intelligence from positive psychology. And over the years, we have really merged a lot of our passions.
Hmm.
And it's been such a gift to be on this journey with you. And no man has lasted 20 years with me. So hats off to you.
Well, it's been a great journey. We've got a bunch of published articles. We have some books that we co-authored, Emotional Brilliance, which I'll talk about one of the tools that we highlight in there.
Yeah.
And
And I was just going to say to the audience, Relly has let me add my name to a couple of things that he actually created, such as why teams need emotional intelligence. And I'm always grateful for that, Relly. So before we
okay.
get into tears here, thanking each other, how did you get interested in
Yes,
this whole crazy school of emotional intelligence? And it's only been called emotional intelligence since about
right.
1995, when Dan Goleman, who was a writer for various and
Yeah.
sundry publications,
Yeah.
decided to write a book on it.
Yeah, so let me tell you, and I'll just kind of highlight. So it was in 2007, going back, that I started the show and then had someone as a guest talk about a topic, and you came on, and there were EI topics, emotional intelligence, around optimism. And then that's when we got together in 2008. So we've been there ever since. So how did I get started? I mentioned my dad was very intellectual, and you'd say, "So how are you feeling?" He would always tell you what he's thinking. So he didn't really have the feeling domain down. And I remember being in Montreal with my girlfriend at the time in college. And she in high school, she had won best looking, and I should have been I should have been at the height of excitement. And here we were in Montreal, and I was like, it's okay. It seems, yeah, it's all right. And I was kind of blasé, and I'm like, my ability to step back, like, come on, what are you doing? This is fantastic. I was feeling too much like my dad, and I realized it was the emotional piece. And so from that, in my program, I got involved in therapy. I was involved in a bunch of group therapy, and I started working on the domain, the affective domain, which I had my master's. And then one of the other significant defining moments was my first big job where I worked in an institution for adolescents, and we had a behavior mod program, and if someone you had a timeout where you had to go in for 30 minutes, and if you refused the timeout, you got locked up. Well, that sequence happened with Tony. And Tony had discouraged the staff. I said, you got a timeout. That was 23 to 24. I only had a BA in psychology. You get the worst clients with the least experience. That was me. I didn't really know what I was doing. He refused the timeout, called security. We brought him up into this lockup room, the second floor, put him in there, and we had to carry him there, and he's trying to kick me, put him in there, big 2x4 in the door. He's locked in. 10 minutes later, he calls down, and I was with 20 other adolescents, the only staff. And they're all there because they're delinquent. So you can imagine what's going on. And I go up, and he says, he's going, Nadler, Nadler. I go up, let him out. And then he said, I got to the bathroom. I said, all right, fine. And I'm thinking about what havoc is being with the 20 below in the first floor. And then he says, I'm not going back in there, and
Oh,
you
jeez.
can't make me. And I'm like, oh my God. And so we're talking about emotional intelligence. I became flooded. I was like, all right, what do I do? And he was, flooded, and he thought, all right, this is a big deal. He's not going back in. And you've probably worked with this at times. I put
No,
my hand
I
on
just
him.
I just do this. I
Yeah.
just pull my hair out.
That's what I was about to do. So I put my hand on them, and then they pushed me, and that was the deal. So then I got him quickly in a headlock. We raced down the hallway, threw him in this room in the cell, but we both fell. So whoever got up first was going to lock the other one in. Because I played football, I was more agile. I got up first. So basically, what was going to be a big scene was over quickly. Put the 2x4 on. 10 minutes later, as I'm downstairs with the other adolescents, I smell smoke. Tony set his mattress on fire because he was so angry at me.
Oh, yeah.
He was flooded. I wasn't proud about what I did either. And so that idea of managing emotions, and if you don't manage your emotions, you got stinking thinking. And so that set me on this path, not only for me to learn more about my emotions, but like Tony, how do I help others so they don't have stinking thinking?
So is there is there a way we get to that? I mean, not everybody is going to get to stinking thinking by smelling a mattress on fire, right? But we all get there in our own way based on what is making us feel stressed in the moment. So is there something like maybe a negative bias that we might have or we're giving
Yeah.
attention to? Maybe talk a little bit about how we get there.
Yeah. Let me talk a little bit about our thinking. And so this goes back to what you already highlighted. We're on autopilot. So we don't really think. And I know, Kat, we've talked about this on the shows with AI, Siri, Alexa, we're just not thinking that much. We don't have to. So the brain's getting a little mushy. So what I end up saying, there's a kind of these decision derailers. And part of this is I have an article in Psychology Today with this. We don't like to think hard, deep, or long. Give me the shortcut. AI, give me the shortcut. So we're always looking for the shortcut. So we're not thinking long. When we do think, we're distracted constantly. So our focus, there's no quality because we're distracted. We get interrupted every 3 minutes, half of that time by ourselves. When we do think, what's our default mode focus? And we've talked about this, it's the negativity bias. So when we do think, it's all about what's wrong, what could be wrong, how do I get in front of it? And then the fourth one, when we do think, we're overwhelmed with stress, threat, uncertainty. So again, these all lead to stinking thinking. And then when the last part of this, when we do think, our decision making is impaired by what worked before.
Mhm.
So you kind of, this idea we're on autopilot and we're just not retrieving or generating something that's going to be the most beneficial in that moment.
Been there many times, many, many times.
Yeah.
So you've been talking to us a little bit about your influencers. You've been talking a little bit about how you got into emotional intelligence. And you talked a little bit about one of your favorite concepts, which is stinking thinking. When you put all this together, what has been your underlying mission? The thing
Yeah.
that really creates this beautiful, uh, I'll just say, vision that you
Yeah.
have for what you do and how you do it.
So I think a big part of that, and it goes with the autopilot, how do we create a gap? We know we got stimulus, and typically it's stimulus, same response. So there's some of the turbulence tools are first creating a gap, and we'll talk about some of those like the name and emotional audit. So what do you do in the gap? So not only do you have the same old outdated response, you have hopefully the best response. And so that's really been my focus. And a lot of these tools from Daniel Goleman and the EI model, my focus has really been on the how to. We all know these. Now we can measure emotional intelligence. Now we can see what scores we have with the EQI and other tests. What do you do in the moment? And working with first responders, the more that we can front load awareness about themselves and how
Mhm.
they manage themselves so that in the moment they can pull out some of these tools to have the best response.
Oh, absolutely. And it sounds like it's a very simple thing to do, but we both know that we often get in our own way. So when we come back, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about turbulence tools and how to stay out of autopilot, off of autopilot, and use some of these wonderful, amazing, and easy to use tools to be your best in the moment. Don't go away. You're listening to Leadership Development News. Welcome back to a very special show on Leadership Development News. Celebrating our 20th year anniversary, our special guest today is Dr. Relly Nadler. And it probably feels really strange to be on the other side of the table, Dr. Relly, but we're going to get the best out of your brain today by making sure that the audience really hears and learns about what you do and the how of how you do it. Because you said something really powerful before the break, and that is great thinkers. Obviously, people like Dan Goleman, Peter Senge, Stephen Covey, we can name a lot of them, right? They don't really get into the how-tos as much as you do.
Mhm.
So let's stay there
Yeah.
and help our audience really broaden their depth of knowledge. Why don't you talk a little bit about key challenges of leaders today? What are they, and how do you
Yeah.
help them get around them?
Well, let me just first share this. We've had Daniel Goleman on the show, a couple of different times. And during the break, he said to you and I, because it's both of us, he's like, wow, you guys do this every day, the tools.
Yeah.
I only write about it. That
Yeah.
was that was a huge compliment for the mission and the vision of the how-to. So we talked about being on autopilot. That's one of the challenges for sure. And that's why you get stinking thinking. So some of the tools will help you get quality thinking. But a couple of the other challenges are we are under more emotional distress than ever before. Gallup tells us we're on overwhelm, more uncertainty, anger, the divisiveness, and about 75% of us need more help. So we got a lot of emotional things happening with us, kind of like me and Tony. And then how do we manage that? But here's the other side. We're not that self-aware. One of the keys for emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And some of the Tara Yurick talks about in her book, Insight, about we think we're self-aware, maybe 85 to 90% from our research. Only about 15% are. And so that's the work, Kat, that you and I do. So we're not that self-aware, even though we think we are. We think we're better cooks. We think we're better drivers. Until you talk to someone else, they go, wait a minute. And the other part is we don't slow down. So slow thinking. And so the coaching part that we do, and a lot of times we talk about being a thinking partner. Daniel Kahneman has fast and slow thinking. And when I'm with executives, I say, you think you need more practice in fast thinking? Maybe first responders, who you work with, but most of our executives, they have time. We only slow think, reflect, be in the gap about 2%. And so one of the things that I like when we think about that, because we know how powerful coaching is. And so there's a Psychology Today article that talks about if it's things are only in your head, it's a fiend. And a fiend, because it's dark and it's in your head and we are perseverating on things, and a fiend it's fearful, it's irrational, it's exaggerated, it's negative, and it's dark. And so think about this as you're thinking about all the things in your head. It's like it's in the shadows, and everything looks larger in the shadows. We're more anxious, we're more depressed. The default mode network where we talked about as far as neuroscience just goes on to what's wrong, what could be wrong. The negativity bias fills the head. It's exaggerated, it's negative. You talk to Kat, you talk to me, you talk to a coach, you talk to your therapist, you talk to a good friend. You're putting your thoughts on the examination table. Just like your body's on the examination table with a doctor, your thoughts are on the examination table. You get a chance to step back and reflect, which we don't do from what I just said. And then there is the aspect, and again, Kat and I like our acronyms. And
They're
so you,
easy to remember.
and you go from a fiend, which is kind of this ruinous rumination, and it feeds itself. And if you're only in the head, we think we're protecting ourselves. We think we're helping, but it has its own negativity bias it takes off. So talking about it, you have glitter. And you talk with a coach, a good friend. The G is what's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish? You will put light on it so it feels a little bit more realistic. You may get insight for the eye. And then there's two T's. If with a coach or a therapist, there's a transaction. And we'll go through some of our tools, which are the transactions. Some of these transactions can be transformational. Not all of them. So that's the second T in glitter. Oh, I tried this. Wow, this worked. I'm going to keep doing this. I've changed my mindset on this. And it's empowering and it's realistic. So that's all kind of the value of having someone to talk about. It's your ideas, but you're just shedding more light. It's out of the shadows.
That is so brilliant to talk about taking something that in my world we would call is mag tight, right?
Hmm.
So if you look at a ray of light coming from any kind of something that you're putting light on. So a lot of people do that, with all kinds of equipment. But in this case, if you're negative and you're in that fiend state, you go mag tight.
Hmm.
That focus gets so narrow and it's
Yes.
dangerous. People
Yes.
literally get killed when they're in that mag tight mindset. And what you're saying is it's so easy to get out of that, as you called it, ruinous rumination by going into glitter. And I love the way that you made it so simple. What is the goal? What is it I'm trying to achieve here? And for the audience, let me just say this again. This is where you take that flashlight that goes from mag tight to mag wide,
Yeah.
because now you're focused on it and you're putting light on it. And now you can see your thinking and you get insight from a new perspective. So that mag wide
Right.
is now big. And that's where that transaction can get transformational. And we go from getting into our heads in this negative bias to empowering ourselves, energizing ourselves, looking at the broader picture, that
Yeah.
big, beautiful light. And that's where the reality sets in and we get more realistic in the moment. Did I get that right?
You got it right. And then I think there's homework, and we always talk about what do you do between coaching sessions. So that's kind of the why powerful conversations help from fiend to glitter.
No, absolutely. And I want to make sure the audience heard those 4 challenge areas that you reviewed.
Okay.
So some of us, especially in roles where we are leading others, whether we're in a team or we're at the top, right, of the food chain in a company, we get more emotional the more distress we feel. And that's data. That is data. And I tell everybody all the time, Relly, feelings are facts. They
Right.
are giving you information, and we often dismiss them. And when we're dismissing them, we are creating distress for ourselves. So more emotional distress is the first challenge, if I heard you correctly.
Yes.
The second one is that we get less emotionally self-aware. So we have less emotional self-awareness than we ever have, probably in the history of being human beings, based on a lot of things that are going on. And the research says that while many of us think we're very self-aware, only about 15% of us
Right.
are truly self-aware, meaning we're able to put ourselves in the moment in someone else's shoes to see the perspective they have instead of clinging to what
Yeah.
we think is the right way. And then the third one is many of us, because as you said earlier in the show, it's safer to go on autopilot. And we go on autopilot more often than ever before, about 95% of the time. And
Yeah.
that makes us more reactive with stinking thinking.
Yeah.
And getting to the fourth challenge then is we practice less slow thinking than fast thinking. Fast thinking is what gets us in trouble and creates more distress, creates
Yeah.
expectations that
Yeah.
creates more stress.
Yeah.
And so we need to get more slow thinking when really only 2% of the times
Yes.
humans are actually practicing that slow thinking. Did I capture all that?
I think you got it great. And I know not only do you got it great, but this is the same message that you share. This is what's kind of fun. And I'm going to just share one more thing about your mag tight. The big researcher behind emotional intelligence is Richard Boyatzis.
Yep.
And he was the very first person I interviewed. And a lot of some of that gets credit to Daniel Goleman. Well, Richard Boyatzis now has a lot of research tying in neuroscience, which both of us love. The mag tight, what he says is if you're mag tight, and he calls this the negative emotional attractor. And so it's tunnel
Right.
vision. And we have tunnel vision, we only are seeing about 20%. If you think about your peripheral vision,
Mm-hmm.
when you're coaching and when you put your thoughts on the table and when you get excited about your goal, that's the positive emotional attractor. And you have about 180 degrees in your vision. So you see more when you're not, another term we would use, hijacked. And so that'll happen, in coaching and having these powerful conversations.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So when we think about the hows, really, uh, let's talk a little bit about your turbulence tool that I really
Right.
love, which is moment mastery. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
So again, you're trying to get a gap between stimulus and response. And so we got at least to highlight, one or two of them. So one is what you and I have in our book, Emotional Brilliance, and you have it. People can go to Amazon. It's also on Audible, and you'll hear Cathy's background, mine, but also more about this tool that we call name. So we have emotions all the time. We experience about 400 emotions a day. We're not really able to kind of label them. So the name NAME stands for another acronym. N is name and normalize. A is accept. M is manage, and you manage thoughts and actions. E is express. And so I've used this in coaching, and I'm sure you have too, Kat. It's like, oh, what am I supposed to do? Just the first N for name, and giving a label. It's called affect labeling in the neuroscience world. By just putting a name on it is a cognitive process and minimizes some of the emotionality. So I'm having anxiety thoughts versus I am anxious. And it creates a little distance. So putting a name on it and having to think about that lessens it. So that's the first one. Then you have accept. And I think as you and I've talked about, and especially in our book, Emotional Brilliance, I think that's the hardest. We have so much going on today, the distress you talked about. It's hard to accept. Can you, as hard as it is, lean in? Buddhism talks about the suffering. And again, that's a name. Can I say, yeah, I'm suffering? Yeah, this is really bad. I gotta lean in and stay with it. And we know from ACT, acceptance commitment therapy, if you can just stay with the feeling, somehow it doesn't disappear, but it becomes a little less. And again, as we know as humans, we've all been there. I'm not the only one. So there's some tools in our book around accept. But then you have manage, which we're talking about for coaching. And you got to manage your thoughts so
Mhm.
you don't have stinking thinking. but then you got to have actions. And so the manage, and there's tools in there, and we'll highlight one of them with the emotional audit is under the manage. But then I think sometimes people around the E, which is express, and maybe it's writing it in a journal for you, or maybe you're going to tell someone. And this is where you get very tactical back to transaction. Who are you going to tell? Are you telling the right person? And they say, oh, no big deal. You know, what's the big deal about that? And you go, oh, why did I tell them? That's not the response that I wanted. So I think in the E, you have to think about what do you want to express, but probably more importantly is who are you expressing it to? Is so important. And we all know if you express something and it's heartfelt and you don't think the person's listened, or worse, they give you advice that you don't want. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, I'm taking some notes because I'm having a little epiphany here. You know, you're so good at this, Relly. So, um, we haven't really scripted this, but it looks like the tool for name, if I got it right, is to normalize what you're dealing with, whatever the feeling or emotion is. And just noticing it creates that cognitive opportunity to give it context and to give it a quality that you can recognize, right?
Right,
You
right.
might not necessarily know the name of it, but you can give it a quality, and eventually you're going to get to be able to name what it is. The acceptance piece, now, there is a way for us to accept our emotions. And you talked a little bit before about the positive emotional attraction and the negative emotional attraction. And for me, I'm just checking in with you.
Yeah.
When I can make something a positive emotional attractor and I accept it, then I am less likely
Mm.
to dismiss it or be distressed by it, which makes it a negative emotional attractor, which is
Mm.
going to keep me in that bias. And
Right.
it's going to keep me in stinking thinking.
Yeah.
So maybe we can actually use PEA, positive emotional attractor, in that acceptance piece,
That's
so
good.
that we're kind of letting go of some of that emotional distress. Okay, good.
Yes.
And
And
go ahead.
well, I think the other part, that's really popular today is Mel Robbins' Let Them. And so sometimes in the acceptance,
Mhm.
it's usually around somebody else or something else, or about if it's about someone else, the acceptance part of that is, let them do that. Why am I making it my problem?
I love it. I love it. That's a great way to create a positive emotional attractor
Right.
out of something that's driving you nuts. And I have to say, for those of you who are listening, think about a time in your life when what Relly just said would have saved you a lot of heartache.
Yeah.
Just let them. And we know in the world of emotional intelligence, when you are assertive, what you're doing is you're just asserting for yourself a healthy boundary that says, do what you want to do as long as you don't cross the boundary
Right.
into my principles,
Yes.
my values, my way of wanting to be. So yeah, if we just take that, let them do it, right? That's on
Right.
them,
Right.
it's not on me, and then keep moving through that beautiful phase of the emotional audit. And maybe you're going to talk a little bit more
Yeah.
about
We'll talk
that.
about it.
And then the expression, you can journal it, just get it out,
Yeah.
right? Just get it out. And I remember when I was at the Intuition Institute, we talked about taking emotions, giving them a quality, whether it was a rose, and
Hmm.
then letting the petals fall off of it to say, okay, we're letting it go. Here's the rose. We're
Oh,
letting.
nice. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break, really, but I want to make sure that when we come back, we dive into your beautiful brain, and in that turbulence toolkit around the moment mastery, get
Yeah.
more into that emotional audit, because I think there's going to be some sweet spots in there our audience isn't going to want to miss. So come right back. You're listening to a special interview with Dr. Relly Nadler. and leadership development news. Welcome back to one of my favorite shows ever, and that is an interview with my bestie, Dr. Relly Nadler. And we were just talking about the notice, accept, manage, express. And I know we want to jump in here to more of the tools in your turbulence toolkit, but we've had a couple of, questions in the chat about the meet yourself background. So let me address that real quickly. Relly and I spent a good time last week, possibly it was more than a week mentally, with Dr. Antoine Aid in Cambridge University, getting certified in a brand new tool called Meet Yourself. And the distinguishing character trait of this tool that Relly is going to emphasize as we go through the emotional audit and the empathy audit is it's an opportunity to understand who you are, both from a genetic standpoint and from a behavioral standpoint. And then they marry these two beautiful pictures of you and introduce you to yourself for the very first time from your whole person. That's your genetics and the power of your behavior. So for those of you who are trying to figure out what the heck is that, well, that's all it is. I didn't get a chance to change my screen, but I figure we might as well give some kind words to Dr. Aid while
Yes.
we had a minute. And Relly, let's jump back in here to our
Right.
emotion audit and these gorgeous tools.
So we talked about creating a gap so you don't have stinking thinking. Stimulus, same response. Stimulus, same response. What we want is stimulus. Oh, powerful questions, coaching, best response. So I've been highlighting this emotional audit for a long time. And now with AI, you may want to think about these with AI prompts, kind of that same thing. In 15 seconds, if you have the right prompts that elicit the right response, you can have your best thinking, not stinking thinking. And so each of these, one of the things I've been kind of describing this now, these are like mindful data. It's kind of a mindfulness questions. And so the first one, and we're highlighting this and we're shining that when you are all over the place, we want to get very specific. So here's where we do want to get specific. It's going to lead to the positive emotional attractor. What is it that I'm thinking now? So you step back, because again, we talked about it, we're only doing that 2% of the time. You step back. What am I thinking? And if you're triggered, is there a pattern there? I can't believe they're saying that. Why is this happening? What's going on? Why is this always going on for me? Is that a pattern if you're triggered? So it's data. So what am I thinking? And it's really the metacognition, thinking about your thinking. So that's the first question. And then you ask it as an AI prompt. In 3 seconds, you're going to get a response. The second one, again, from a mindfulness data, what is it that I'm feeling now? And meta awareness. And sometimes you have to do a body scan and say, what is it that I'm feeling? Go back to the name. I got this scratchy chest. What is that scratchy chest? And if you know yourself, you go, oh, that may be anxiety. And this is where, again, in situations that are triggering, it's probably the same two or three things. You're impatient, you're upset, you're irritable. All right, you should know that so that you can catch it. So that's the second one. Wait 3 seconds, do your body scan. The third one is meta attention. What am I trying to accomplish now? I'm in a meeting and what am I thinking? I'll use that as an example. What am I thinking? Oh, come on, this meeting's going on forever. I got stuff to do. What am I feeling? I'm impatient. I'm getting irritable. I'm tapping my foot. I'm sighing on screen. What do I want? I want to move. I want to get this going. We're on a tangent. All right, good. So you know what your intentions are, which then that shines that flashlight to, okay, that's my intention, because before it wasn't clear. And then the fourth one is critical. And you said it earlier, how am I getting in my way right now? Meta awareness and meta attention. What am I doing? And maybe I'm not saying anything in this meeting. I'm sitting here, not paying attention. I'm sighing. I'm stepping back. Or how am I getting in my way? I'm interrupting people. I got a tone to my voice. Is that the first time that you've done that? No. There's a pattern in how you're getting away. So from coaching, you want to pull out the patterns. And then the fifth question is the corrective action. And again, you ask it, and now you have all this data, thinking, feeling, want, getting in way. What do I need to do now to be my best? And the last couple of years, I've added to be my best because it's a better AI prompt. Instead of what do I need to do now differently, what do I need to do now to be my best? And your brain, like the AI prompt, is saying, oh, to be your best, okay, let me draw some of that. Let me bring that to the focus. So that's the emotional audit.
Now, you call parts of this, when you aggregate them together, the value calculation.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a new term for me. And if we talk about, we talked to Mark Wallman in one of our last shows.
Mhm.
So the default mode network can either go into worry or imagination. So our friend Martin Seligman talks about that, the imagination network. The and then we have the executive functioning. Well, the salience network is the one, what brings value for me? The insular and anterior cingulate cortex. Okay, with all this information, and that's what I think this question does, what do I need to do to be my best? Because it allows you to think. And if we're getting too far off in the default mode network in worry,
Mhm.
and the executive functioning is the action, well, we want to bridge. And the salience network happens also in meditation and it happens in relaxation. It's just allowing salience, what pops up. And so that question can accentuate that. What do I need to do to be my best now? It is kind of emotional intelligence. And then from there, you may have the executive functioning. Okay, that means there's an action. Going back to our glitter, is there a transaction? Or maybe it's transformational.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. So tell me, so the audience can hear a little bit about, you said it's the empathy audit and
Yeah.
how that looks juxtaposed to the,
You
you know,
appreciate you
emotional
appreciate
audit.
this, Kat. This is early on. There was someone who was an ex-Navy SEAL person that I was coaching, and he liked this idea of emotional intelligence. So I gave him this assignment, in coaching. How do you bring coaching in between the coaching sessions? I said, in the morning, especially if you're feeling some stuff, go through this audit. It's kind of you understanding you, a little bit using your background is meet yourself. So this is another way to kind of describe this. The emotional audit could be meet yourself. And so he would do that. And I said, and then in the afternoon. And then he came back to the next coaching session. He said, I really like that emotional audit. It seems to be helping me meet myself. And he said, I'm using that with others. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he was doing management cat. And he said, before I go into a meeting, he reversed the questions,
Oh,
which is now the empathy audit. So he said, I'm going to meet with Kat. I wonder what Kat's thinking about this meeting in me. I wonder what she's feeling about this meeting in me. I wonder what she wants to accomplish in this meeting. And then I wonder, is there a way that she could get in the way or I could get in the way? And then before I get into this meeting, what do I need to do differently? So another way of saying that this is the empathy audit, but you know
Mhm.
what it is, Kat? In psychology, they call this theory of mind. A
Mm,
fancy term, but now I got AI type questions to elicit what's going on in their mind so I can be more empathic, I can be more reflective, and really be authentic and help them.
I love it. I love it. When we think about how simple some of these ideas are, you want to kind of you want to kind of think, why haven't we figured this out before? Why can't an individual on their own figure
Yeah,
this out? And obviously, name has a lot to do with it. Not being able to understand your own emotions has a lot to do with it. But talk a little bit about, before we have to log off here for the day, how do you sum up for a client a way for them to be in that
yeah,
empathy audit mode? Because a lot of people are so into me, me, me. How can we get them into
yeah,
other, other, other?
yeah. Well, I think some of it is slowing down. We haven't really talked about some of these quick mindfulness tools. We have a lot of mindfulness hacks, the deep breathing, the box breathing. There's all this kind of tools of bringing mindfulness, and one of the ones that I like is tickling your palms. You're in a meeting, you're feeling anxious. Anything to bring your awareness back, wiggling your toes to being in the here and now. And then ask some of these questions. And so, especially if you're talking about compassion, and I love that last question. I'm going to be, Kat, what do I need to do to be my best with her? And maybe I'm going to say, I really need to give her some compliments, or I really need to encourage her, or I really need to tell her kind of how I feel. And so it's being more attentional. And that's where the meta attention, because otherwise, autopilot. And I'm on my own agenda. And this is where I like this idea, Kat, 15 seconds.
Yeah.
It'll generate new data, new behaviors, new action for you.
And it's so powerful to get somebody out of their default mode network and get them into that meta awareness of
Yes,
looking at something from someone else's perspective,
yes,
get them into that executive brain. And as you were talking about that salience network, because that's where we connect with other people too,
right,
right?
right.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, I'm just looking, we got a couple minutes. I would
Yeah,
say
yeah.
a little bit about mindfulness. You've been teaching that to first responders, and I've been doing it, a large part of my life. This is on the front side. It's so efficient. I was telling a client about mindfulness the other day, and I said, if you're not doing this, you're just not performing as much as you are. And 5 minutes, 7 minutes, it's going to allow you to be your best. And I think what it does, it allows you to see that default mode network, step back, and then when you watch your thoughts without attachment, that's some of the salience network. And you just allow those thoughts, like on a movie screen, to keep moving in a non-judgmental way, and it's your movie. You're the writer, director, producer. It can be fascinating. You're
You're
not trying to
also the
solve a
star of the show.
you're the star of the show, but you just don't want to attach to anything. Keep it going. But then I would say, as a little tip, when you're just before you close your eyes, this is where you may want to do the audit, or you may want to say, what's my goals? Going back to glitter. Now I've got myself in a relaxed state, kind of like athletes, they do this kind of visualization. Now let me picture myself in this meeting. Let me picture myself in this day and walk through just like you want to do it, being your best self. So in the brain, it's kind of a pre-prep plan for that.
And one of the beautiful things that I want to make sure our audience hears about what you do for people even in just a common interaction with them, like you are with me, even when we're on the show, that staying aware and not letting yourself get attached to the outcome is the magic sauce. Because the minute we get attached to that outcome, we are driving, and it may not be authentic. It certainly isn't reflective. And it is not in any way, shape, or form being empathetic towards those who you are trying to get the best out of. And I think that's a hard task for any leader,
Yeah.
because they have goals, and
Right.
they have, these ridiculous goals sometimes, especially when they are in task mode. So this has been so immensely helpful. And I think we're going to have to do a part 2 if you're game.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll have to find another date to do
No,
part 2, because I think we really can get into some of these mindfulness hacks and some of the things that you have to share on the how-tos. This has been an amazing show, and I know it's going to get a lot of traction. And those of you who are out there who aren't following Dr. Relly Nadler yet, please do yourself a kindness. He has so many free bonuses, tips, and tools, and you get access to his Psychology Today posts. So follow him in LinkedIn. And Relly, anything you want to add before we say goodbye?
I think the last thing is to be emotionally intelligent happens in the moment, happens in relationships, and you can do that. You can be better in 15 seconds applying some of these tools.
What a beautiful way to end today's show, and a way to practice for the coming new year. And I want to thank you again for celebrating our 20th anniversary together by allowing me to take time to interview you. It's been an
Thanks,
absolute
Kat. I appreciate
pleasure.
it. I'm looking forward to do the same with you.
Well, I want everybody to tune in next week to tune up your leadership and your team skills here on Leadership Development News. So come back. We have a lot to share with you.